Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, I'm John, this is Many a True Nerd. Welcome to the Many a True Nerd 2022 Awards, because bloody hell has it been a good year for video games. And to be honest, a surprising one too. I suspect my top 15 this year is going to have, yes, more surprises and controversial placements on it than any previous awards I've put together. But before we get into that, okay, two games I want to give a special shout out to. Alright, the special mentions before we get into the rankings, because there are two games in particular I think deserve to be acknowledged, but I can't rank them because I simply haven't played them enough to know where they ought to go. I wouldn't be comfortable trying to compare these games to the games that are on the list because I simply haven't had enough time to play them before the end of the year. And those games are Rogue Legacy 2 and Dwarf Fortress. Two very good, very compelling, very interesting games, but I only played both for the first time earlier this month. I simply have not had enough time to come to a proper evaluation and understanding of them. But I feel like they deserve to be shouted out anyway. So, okay, that's the nice non-controversial bit. Now to get into the, yes, perhaps more surprising stuff, and we're starting off stronger here. Number 15, The Quarry. Now, is The Quarry actually a good game? On paper, probably not so much, but what I really like about it is it knows what it wants to be. And that is a love letter to dumb, over-the-top 90s slasher films, starring a cast of teenagers running around a dark forest at night, screaming, skinny dipping, screaming some more, precisely what you would expect from a dumb straight-to-video Friday the 13th knockoff. And that's what it is from start to finish. It is ridiculous, it is stupid, and it commits to that. If this game had, at any point, decided to take itself seriously, had, like, you know, a big, actually sad, tragic moment, or even worse, tried to have, like, a message or a lesson to it, it would have fallen apart, but it never does. From start to finish, this game is just ridiculous, gory, running around screaming nonsense, and it's just a whale of a time. Number 14, a first for the Many a True Nerd Awards, I'm handing out a joint award because I can't make my mind up which of these two somewhat similar games is my favourite. So we're giving a joint award to Railgrade and Sweet Transit. Two similar, but also I suppose very different takes on train games. And I do love a good train game. Railgrade much more focused on setting up a small train set, dealing with traffic, signalling, etc. Sweet Transit way more focused on the big picture, building a continent-spanning railway to feed resources into a growing town. Both brilliant in their own ways, delightful train games, and as I say, I love a good train game, and I just couldn't pick between them, so they get to share the trophy. Number 13, Tunic, and I would say this is a deceptively ambitious game given when you get down to it. What Tunic wants to be is a streamlined Dark Souls crossed with isometric Zelda, and Tunic just about pulls it off. The highlight being a fictional language used throughout the game. Every sign, item description, tutorial you can't read, and instead have to slowly figure out how to translate it with context clues. It's genius, but in general, it is a delight to play. A charming overworld to explore, clever dungeons with all sorts of little puzzles in them, rock-hard bosses, and more importantly, the fox you're playing as has a quiff that bobs and has got physics on it. So basically, yeah, 10 out of 10. Number 12, Stray. Oh, Stray is interesting. A very interesting game that, if nothing else, demonstrates how crucial amazing animation work can be to making a game work, because Stray would 100% not work with any other main character, but the fact you're playing as a hugely expressive cat who has got a dedicated meow button and stretches and purrs and knocks things off surfaces because you're a cat and you bloody well can, mix in some surprisingly emotional moments at the start and the end of the game, and a world that is beautifully designed to be played in as a cat, filled with all sorts of hidden corners and rooftops and open windows that make you feel like you're sneaking around, breaking in, exploring spaces you're not supposed to be getting into. It's just, yeah, a really fun, interesting experiment. Number 11, a game you've almost certainly forgotten about already, Peglin. I love Peglin, which is basically a pachinko roguelike, which I'm going to remind you because I feel like I'm the only person in the world that remembers Peglin even exists, but seriously, this game is... it's lovely. It's probably in the top 5 games I've put the most hours into this entire year. And I think the key that makes Peglin really work for me is just occasionally it's nice when a game doesn't overbalance itself. And what I mean by that is Peglin is a game that is very happy to just give you a random selection of tools, some of which when put together will become what some people might say is overpowered or game breaking. But no, that's good. More games should sometimes be willing to say, you know what, if the chips fall just right, you're going to have the dumbest run possible in this game. You're going to be one-shotting bosses, the screen is going to fill up with pachinko balls and numbers, and you are just going to slaughter everything in front of you. So many games are scared of that happening and aggressively balance every upgrade you can receive to make sure none of them can make you too powerful. Peglin is a game that just embraces fun and chaos and just says, you know what? Go nuts. Sometimes you're just going to get the right combination of upgrades and bloody hell, then it's party time. I love it. Number 10, and here's one I was not expecting to end up on my Game of the Year list. It's Choo Choo Charles, and seriously, if you told me a few months ago that between Choo Choo Charles and the Callisto Protocol, it was the dumb train spider game that was going to be the better put together, more effective, and more technically stable, and more scary horror game, I would have assumed you were drunk. But here we are. Choo Choo Charles is a brilliant lesson in keeping things simple. It's a small open world, you know there is something out there in the mist hunting you, and the train is a brilliant addition that complements that perfectly, because the game can set bonus objectives, things you want to go and get, just slightly away from the rails, meaning every time you step away from the train, your only source of protection and the only location you've got access to weapons, you're constantly worried that Charles might appear. Because if he does, you are completely bloody helpless, cowering in a building, hoping he might just go away, or he might get distracted just long enough for you to get back to the train and get out of Dodge. It's a solid idea, executed really bloody nicely. Number 9, Backpack Hero, a game that teaches us a lesson that we need to come back to again and again in the gaming industry, which is find yourself a core mechanic that works, a gameplay loop that is strong enough to be the center of your game. Build everything else around it. And Backpack Hero nails that, because its core gameplay mechanic is the Resident Evil 4 inventory system, which, quite frankly, is good enough to be a game by itself. In fact, it is. I played another game earlier this year called Save Room. There was literally just inventory Tetris puzzles. But Backpack Hero has the genius idea of taking that core concept and moving it on to its logical conclusion, where every interaction that you have with the world is done via your inventory, where how powerful you are is a function of how well you've organised it. By the end of the game, it is a hugely bloody complicated jigsaw puzzle, and just like I was discussing earlier with Peglin, if you get it just right, the game is not afraid to say, hey, you are now an unstoppable backpack god, go have fun murdering everything. It's just a really solid, easy to grip idea, but also comes with a surprising amount of depth. A really, really effective puzzle game. Number 8, Total War Warhammer 3, and this one is, oh blimey. This one is very hard to evaluate, because if we're going to be honest here, most people who are playing Warhammer 3 don't actually want to play Warhammer 3. The campaign that's unique to Warhammer 3 is honestly a bit underwhelming, but as I say, we all got Warhammer 3 because we wanted to wrap up the Warhammer trilogy and play the blended campaign. And that, I will admit, is pretty bloody magical. Just the sheer scale of it is incredible. The amount of territory that exists across the world, the number of factions that exist, the diversity in different playstyles if you go between the various different playable races, from vampire counts who have basically no range whatsoever, to the gunpowder-obsessed vampire coast, weapons teams and summons, with the Skaven, ridiculously strong, massive front lines. With Khorne, it is just a ridiculously huge campaign, but it's really tricky to figure out where it ought to go on this list, because as I say, I'm kind of praising Warhammer 1 and 2, as opposed to 3, right there. This is me talking about the entire trilogy, and Creative Assembly is still kind of struggling to figure out what this campaign ought to look like. There's still plenty of work being done to garrisons and AI and diplomacy and all the rest of it. It's an amazing thing just in terms of the scale of it, but it's also still very much a work in progress, and for that reason, position 8 felt about right. Number 7, and here's one I was not expecting to be even that good, never mind on this list, Marvel's Midnight Suns. Effectively a streamlined, stripped down version of XCOM, but with superheroes and a deck builder mechanic put in, and I didn't think that sounded particularly appealing, but bloody hell, I guess you should trust Firaxis, because it really works, and specifically, it works as a delicious snack of a game. Because the fights have been streamlined to a single arena with no fog of war, they tend to be wrapped up in 10-15 minutes. You do that, you go back to base, you go on a date with a superhero, do some upgrades to your deck, get straight back out there and do it again. A perfect game to just sit down with for 20 minutes, or rather, to intend to sit down with for 20 minutes, and then realise that 3 hours have passed. But seriously, the fights feel crunchy and visceral. You feel bloody strong when you're tossing one enemy into another, knocking out both of them in a single attack. It's beautiful. And I found myself by accident playing this game until 2 AM on more than one occasion. Number 6, Pentiment, and I think there's something very interesting and unique about Pentiment next to every other game on this list, which is Pentiment in particular. You can feel the level of love and passion and care and attention that has been put into it. Most likely because this is a passion project that Josh Sawyer has wanted to make and been trying to get off the ground for literally decades. And you can just tell this is a game that he and the other people that worked on it absolutely loved. The amount of thought and care that's gone into tiny historical details in this game is absolutely lovely. In terms of the big picture, it is a well-written, compelling medieval whodunit, but it's the tiny details that really make it work. Like your character's backstory, including what cities they visited in the past and thus what cultural touchpoints they might be more familiar with. What did they study and thus what topics might they be able to engage or not engage with discussion about. It's just a brilliant game overall, I'd say. Number 5, A Plague Tale Requiem, and okay, this is a game that attempts to do a lot and gets pretty much all of it right. As a narrative game, it is gorgeous with some stunning environment, good script, great voice acting. As an action game, the big dramatic set pieces are well directed and exciting. As a stealth game, it's smooth, it works really nicely, and crucially, it's the rats, okay? They are incredible just to look at as millions of them just swarm into areas. And on top of that, it's not just decoration or narrative stuff. They're really interesting mechanically. Driving rats away from one area or luring them over to another, that's a really important part of the game. But more importantly, very often it all comes together. Like a brilliant bit really early on in the game where what looks like a simple stealth section is suddenly flooded by millions and millions of rats, meaning some enemies are incapable of crossing the newly formed rat sea, completely changing the puzzle from what it might originally have appeared as. It's just a really bloody interesting game that gets everything. Narrative, sneaking, combat, it all just works really bloody well, and it is stunningly pretty to look at. Number 4, and I suspect this one's going to be a bit controversial too, Victoria 3, and bloody hell is it hard to evaluate. Yes, a Paradox game at launch. Knowing that in, say, a year, 2 years, 5 years, it might be completely unrecognisable. But I will say, the foundations that are already there, the core of the game, the markets, the production, building things to feed into other things to just desperately try and produce enough goods to keep your people happy and healthy and slowly move your country in the right direction. For me, it works beautifully, even in its starting form, fully aware that it's probably got a long way to go, and what it is now might be completely different to what it is in a few years' time. But still, I have already had a lovely, lovely time with this game. Okay, maybe this is unfair, because it feels like the game has been very specifically targeted at me, a person who loves data and charts and numbers. I'm just a sucker for this stuff already, but then again, I never claimed this was like an objective list, that Victoria 3 is objectively better than the games that are further down the list. This is just me trying to figure out which games I enjoyed, which games were my personal favourites, and for me, as I say, Victoria 3 works beautifully. I just find it so compelling to build, and build some more. And it doesn't hurt that, to my mind, this is probably the most beautiful world map that Paradox have ever created. It's just delightful to look at. Number 3, and oh, here we go. Yep, more controversy. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet. And okay, let's start off by acknowledging there were in fact 2 Pokemon games that came out in 2022. Pokemon Legends came out at the start of this year, and it was a huge, interesting, exciting experiment, but to my mind, it was kind of the test bed. Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, they're the end result that Legends was leading into. The big open world that was tested out in Legends mixed with a more traditional Pokemon format with gyms and characters and stories and cities and all the rest of it put together to form what to my mind may well be one of the best Pokemon games of all time. And certainly the biggest leap forward the franchise has taken literally ever. Because Pokemon Red and Blue to Pokemon Sword and Shield are still pretty bloody recognisable. You still had the same basic core structure, linear routes linking cities together, trainers that were blocking your path so you had no choice but to fight them, long grass you went into to generate a random encounter. Fine, I have loved many Pokemon games, but it's a series that has been needing a step forward into the future for literally decades at this point. And between the 2 of them, I'd say Legends and Scarlet and Violet have got them there. This is the game I have been dreaming of since I was a child and played the original Red and Blue. A giant open Pokemon world where I can go where I want, do what I want, and encounter 100 of the bastards before I even get to the first gym. For me, it is magical, and once again, I am not claiming that Pokemon Scarlet and Violet is objectively better than any other game that was further down this list. It's just, I'm a sucker for this. Alright, I've been in this franchise for over 2 decades, and for me, Scarlet and Violet are a dream come true. I love them, I adore them, I am cheering with happiness every time I'm just exploring a new area and see one of my old favourites from Generation 2 or 3. Fine, for me it's nostalgia, it's rose-tinted spectacles, but I'm still having a whale of a time with it, and it would probably be higher up this list were it not for, yes indeed, another giant, slightly buggy 5 FPS elephant in the room, the technical performance. This game is it's ugly as sin in many places. It's a bit of a bloody mess in that regard. But it doesn't ever really take me out of it because there are some actually really good solid foundations in there. The world map, for example, is really good, really well designed. Lots of fun little hidden areas you can get round to on your first visit and plenty more to rediscover when you come back with more motorcycle abilities. Yeah, it's just a lovely game and a game I feel like I've been waiting literal decades to get my hands on. Number 2, Vampire Survivors. Oh, bloody hell. There's not much to say about Vampire Survivors, really, because it is an incredibly simple game, but also one of the most compelling games that I have ever played. It is just an absolute delight. You just walk around a map, you get slowly swarmed by creatures, you slowly upgrade an arsenal of weapons to get ludicrously more powerful, and eventually the screen just becomes a kaleidoscope of explosions and numbers, and either you die or you win, in which case you die because death kills you anyway. So I haven't figured out how to solve that problem, actually. But seriously, try as I might, it is incredibly difficult to put into words what makes Vampire Survivors work, because I slept on it. Like most of the year, I did not think it looked particularly interesting, and I know there's a bunch of you sitting at home thinking the precise same thing. So I'm going to say, this is an incredibly cheap game. It costs a few pounds, DLC, £2 odd more. Give it a go. Trust me. Because this is one game where more than any other, I've received so many messages from people saying, hey, I saw your Vampire Survivors video, wouldn't have thought it was for me, gave it a go, and I love it. I have heard this so many times this year. This game is just It is ridiculous. And finally, number 1, my Game of the Year 2022, 13 Remastered, the Remake Remastered. A superlative edition of one of the finest shooters ever made. It is stunningly gorgeous. The soundtrack is, okay, it's Elden Ring. Okay, you all knew it was going to be Elden Ring. Alright, we all knew this. Elden Ring is not just my Game of the Year 2022. Elden Ring is the best game of this generation. Elden Ring is straight into my top 10 games of all time. Elden Ring has already, despite only coming out this year, become one of my top 10 most played games on Steam of all time. And that's a top 10 with Fallout games and Skyrim and Civilization and Stellaris in it. And it's already managed to sneak into the top bloody 10. That is ridiculous, but I guess it gives you an indication as to how much I've played this game this year. I'm already up to, I think, 6 or 7 characters. This isn't just starting. This is characters I've got to at least level 35, 40, somewhere thereabouts. The footage you're seeing on screen right now is, I think, my 7th character. An Arcane Faith build that uses the Dragon Communion Seal to cast ridiculously powerful dragon incantations. It is just, it's a beautiful, beautiful game. And I do mean that in so many ways. It is stunning to look at and stunning to explore. Like, I was praising the open world design of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet and praising the graphics of Plague Tale Requiem earlier this very video. Elden Ring beats them both handily. It is stunningly gorgeous, runs like a dream, and the world is probably the finest open world I've ever explored. It is incredible how you can basically just go anywhere on this map and just look around you and see so many interesting, compelling things you want to go and investigate. It is a world that begs to be explored. The soundtrack is incredible. The combat is chunky and rewarding. So many different playstyles feel amazing in different ways. There is a huge variety of enemies that call for different, interesting tactics that you can approach in all sorts of interesting ways. And that's before we get into how bloody good it feels to beat a boss. Oh, bloody hell. This is Game of the Decade stuff right here. This is one of the finest games ever made. This is a masterpiece that in my head I put alongside Hitman Blood Money, Resident Evil 4, an example of video games at their absolute bloody finest. The big main bosses are huge, varied spectacles. There are some ingenious mini dungeons to explore, and I really do appreciate how there are some very small dungeons you can just nip into, get done in 10-15 minutes, as well as huge legacy dungeons you can properly get your teeth into. It's just, it is a superlative, brilliant, amazing game, and it just went on sale for the first time in the Steam Winter Sale. So if you've not already dived in, give it a go. It is wonderful. Oh, it's been a good year. I mean, if 2023 can be even anything near as good, and seriously, cross your fingers for Starfield. Please let Starfield be good. I am desperate for Starfield to be good. I'm really hoping next year that could be my Game of the Year. If it's not, I'm going to be very, very sad indeed. So, join me next year, and we can find out together. Hopefully, you're looking forward to that. But in the meantime, I've been John. This has been Many a True Nerd. And this has been the Many a True Nerd 2022 Awards. Thank you very much, and goodbye.
Claire, show off what the butter packaging does. That's amazing!
25, 50, 100, and then 110
If you need to provide the butter, you just fold the packaging onto the butter and it... that's amazing! That's such a good idea!
See,
How long has butter been doing this?
forever.